Thank you very much, Susan, for the thumbs up. And welcome everyone to our town hall. 1st of March, we've broken the barrier. February, all those snowstorms, it's behind us, I think. Perhaps not, yeah, perhaps not entirely. There are lots of seats at the front here. I'm noticing this feels like a class. All the students are way at the back. And so first of all, a big hello, welcome, Kwe. Thank you for joining us both in person and online. For those who don't know me, my name is Claude Brûlé. I'm your president and CEO at the college. I would like to begin by acknowledging that this gathering is taking place on the traditional unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. As guests, we're honored to be gathering here today, and we want to thank all the generations of Anishinaabe Algonquin people for continuing to take beautiful care of this land. The trees to provide us shade, the water and the food that sustain us, and the paths that connects us all. We are grateful, and we recognize and appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also value the contributions that other First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people have made in shaping and strengthening our community, our province, and our country. So merci, thank you, miigwech. We have a few Zoom, and it doesn't apply to you folks here, but folks who are on Zoom, we have a number of housekeeping items, and those will be added to the chat, so I'm told, for those who are joining us. For our question period, I really encourage participants to engage and ask their questions live by putting up your virtual hand. Of course, for you here, it will be your actual hand. And there is a Q&A tab, you're familiar with that, and that's still available. You can type in your questions along with your name. And again, we ask that if you're in the audience here and you have a questions, put up your hand, and one of our staff will come in with a mic to hand it to you so you can ask your question live. Again, I want us to make this a safe place for everyone to be comfortable in asking their questions. I saw from the survey that we did last time, people are still a little gun shy about asking their questions. We want to make sure you feel comfortable asking your question. And for that, we need an environment of respect, caring, and integrity. So, we want people to keep in mind our college value as they engage with us this afternoon. We have some presentations that we're going to get you through. So I'm not sure if you can see that. I'm looking at the agenda at the back here. For those on Zoom, you can probably see that. We're going to have a series of presentations. Those may answer some questions you may have. So we're going to wait until the presentations are done, then we're going to do the Q&A. And I know some people right off the bat, they go and they type in their question, and chances are as the presentations unfold, that would have probably answered your question. So take a mo, wait until the presentations are done, and then let's see how that addresses perhaps a question or two you may have. And as I said earlier about feedback, we did at the last town hall ask for a number of questions. We put out a survey after the October town hall, lots of great content. I want to thank you all for your honesty, your candor, and how you've answered the questions with your constructive feedback. You'll see that we've taken that into consideration. We've asked questions about how to improve our financial sustainability, how to crack that nugget around our enrollment, and you've had some great input into that. So thank you for your thoughtful feedback in that regard. We have a number of people that will assist me today with the town hall questions and answers, and in no particular order here, I will introduce the panelists. So Chris Jensen, Senior Vice President Academic, Diane McCutcheon, Vice President Human Resources, Dwayne McNair, Vice President Finance and Admin, Laura Stanbra, Vice President Student Services, Mark Savinkoff, Vice President Advancement and Strategy, Erin Langevin, Director of Employee and Labor Relations. I think, is she joining online? She's online, okay. David Soltis, Director of People and Culture. I saw him back there. Yeah, he's back there. Thank you. And Elena McDonnell, our Director of Marketing and Recruitment Student Services, will be our moderator today. There we go. Wonderful. Yes. As always, I like to take this opportunity to share with you a couple of feel-good items, things that, some highlights that have taken place in the recent past. One that I want to share with you is we had a conversation with His Honor Murray St. Clair. As you know, the Pembroke campus does a speaker series, and Jamie Brandberger, Manager of Community and Student Affairs, does a fantastic job in lining up some great speakers. If you have not had a chance to partake in them, I strongly encourage you to do so. They're obviously right now in a webinar format. I'm sure at some point that will change to perhaps hybrid or in person, but as a result of the pandemic, they've been online. And that's allowed us, in fact, to reach and get even a broader spectrum of guest speakers. And so this was an afternoon with His Honor, Murray St. Clair, who is the former chair of the Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And he led us in an engaging conversation about how to support Indigenous students and how post-secondary schools can respond to the calls to action from the Commission's landmark 2015 report. A second highlight was the Prime Minister's visit on February 10th. Justin Trudeau came visit the Ottawa campus, and he spent an hour with practical nursing students here. And a big shout out to Tracy McDougall, who's on vacation right now. She's recouping from that visit. It was a lot. I won't lie to you. To bring a dignitary like this. Yeah, there's a lot behind the scene that takes place to make this happen. And her and her team, so many people that had their finger in this to make this flawless, from security to ITS, the department itself, where Jane Tracolo and Carmen Haas really worked a lot over time to make sure that the students had a remarkable experience. And the two professors, Sadwinder Kaminsky and Kimberly Gray, were fantastic. The students had really, really incisive questions, and they weren't prompted. These young people, really, that came from the heart, and kudos to them for putting their questions to the PM. And I learned a thing or two about some of their questions, and they're things we Canadians need to address. So it was a great event. So for ourselves, for the town hall today, so I'm going to start off, you see on the monitor, right here. I'm going to give you some highlights. We had a board meeting yesterday. No, not yesterday, Monday night. And we had a couple of things that we are hoping to achieve, and it was great. So we had a presentation on R3, our Student Information System renewal. Lois and Krista did a great job. We passed the budget for the coming year for 23-24. That got approved. Ryan Southwood also has a project, one of several, of course, but this one was on college accessibility, and got the dollars approved for next year for that. So thank you, Ryan. We presented on the third quarter financial projections, and the update to the business plan for this year was presented as well. You'll hear from Dwayne later on the budget for next year that was also approved. So thank you, Dwayne, to you and your team. A lot of behind the scene work to get us to where we got on Monday night to get that approved. What I'll focus on very briefly are at a high level, the initiatives that we've put into the 23-25 business plan. And the operative words here are flexible for year one and fluid for year two, meaning we want to have some nimbleness in those initiatives. I'm going to speak to them at a high level. So under goal one, we have 5 initiatives. We're going to be developing a new integrated master campus plan under Dwayne's leadership. We're going to implement a 5-year strategic enrollment management plan, and Chris is leading that along with Laura. We're going to develop the college partnership strategy. And I know over the years you say, Claude, we've done this before. Yes, we've done many incarnations of a college strategic partnership framework. Mark's going to do the definitive one. All right, no pressure. All right. Believe it or not, we're going to start the development of the next strategic plan. The plan that we've put in place that some of you have worked on. It was an interim plan, a 3-year shorter horizon plan. And we're going to be starting the thinking around formulating the next plan now that we're emerging from the public health emergency situation that we were in. We're starting to get more clarity about our future and the future of the post-secondary system. So we want to start paying attention to what that roadmap looks like for the college beyond 2025. And that's work that's going to start over the next 2-year period. We're going to roll out a portfolio analysis and cost containment. Guess who's leading that? Dwayne and his team. Again, that's part of our financial sustainability roadmap that he'll be speaking to. Under Goal 2, we have 2 initiatives, and you're familiar with them because we've spoken to those in the past. The R3 Transformation Project, of course, we're going to continue to roll that out and implement our Strategic Workforce Planning Initiative under Diane McCutcheon and her team. Finally, under Goal 3, we're going to be implementing, I'm not sure if I'm actually announcing this here or people know, but okay, all right, it's okay. She says it's okay. So the team has been working hard on refreshing what you would know as our EDI blueprint. So back in 2019, to great fanfare, we unveiled a plan at that time. Well, 3 years has passed, and they've been hard at work refreshing that plan, and it is now called the 2023-26 IDEA Blueprint. And the A that's been added to inclusiveness or inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. So it spells the word IDEA, very great, IDEA. And that's the blueprint that will be rolled out. And finally, we're going to continue to advance truth and reconciliation initiatives with our Indigenous communities. So those are, again, 9 initiatives. We're trying to keep it focused so that we're not trying to be all things to everyone, because we understand, and you've told us capacity is an issue, and we hear you. And so as a result, we're limiting the number of initiatives to support the progress on the strategic plan to those 9 initiatives. At this point, I'd like to invite Chris to the podium to speak to you about an enrollment update. I think, Chris, after that, you'll be inviting each next. Yeah, okay, perfect. Come on over. All right.
Well, good afternoon, folks. Claude just made a comment about, hopefully we're through the end of this. I happened to look at my weather app this morning, and we've got another 10 to 15 coming Friday. Thank you, Claude. And just before I get started on my slides, just a quick side note that my wife and I picked a date to get married, thinking that we'd always be someplace nice and warm with palm trees on our anniversary. And this is normally a time of year that I'm off in someplace nice and warm with palm trees. Today's my anniversary. I have snow. This is wrong. This is just wrong, and my wife is not amused. But at any rate, enough about that. If I could get the first slide, please. Next slide. Just want to give you a brief update. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we're at now. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we're going for the spring term, and then I'll give you an update, although it's a bit early, on where we're at for the fall. So there's a lot of numbers up on the screen. The things to note are there's a lot of red. And think of this as winter term. Yes, it's a Q3 forecast. But we're in the midst of Q4 right now, where some folks are realizing we're getting toward the end of Q4 and it's starting to pick up. So think of this really as an updated. These are about a week old. These numbers are about a week old. So yes, we've missed our overall targets for the year. The bottom line, there's some interesting things. Domestic, we're still struggling in getting our domestic students. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. The demographics are against us. The number of available college-age direct entry students has been declining, and it will continue to decline for a while. We're currently in a very strong jobs market. And so typically when there's lots of jobs available, fewer domestic students will come directly to college. And so many students are getting good jobs without coming to college first. All of that combined is playing on our domestic enrollments, including the fact that the pandemic changed the world. And we are still sorting out what that means for our domestic students. So as we move forward, we're certainly learning lessons from this for next year, and hopefully we'll be in a better place. So our numbers, we're meeting our targets for next year. International, there's one big number that I want to point out. Note in the lower right-hand corner, 54%. We have 54% more international students this year than we did last year. That's a big number. We are going to continue to be growing our international student enrollments fairly aggressively over the next 5 years. The good news is it won't be as aggressive as 54%. But please note that it's not all doom and gloom with the enrollment picture. We are being very successful in recruiting international students. We had a couple of hiccups this year that were beyond our control with regards to Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada and their ability to process study permits in a timely fashion. So we had much more interest from our international students than we were able to welcome to our campuses because they weren't able to get their study permits in time. Good news there, IRCC has really turned a corner. They've put a great deal more resources at it, and they're now able to process those study permits in a much faster fashion. If I could go to the next slide, please. So where are we at for spring? The story with domestic students is continuing. We are still struggling to get the domestic students in. At this point last year, we were 86% of our way toward our target. This year, we're at 55%. Well, okay, so these numbers again are about a week old. Those numbers are continuing to creep up. I reported yesterday that we were at about 60% of our way to our domestic target. So again, we're struggling domestically, and there's a large team that's working very hard at turning that corner. And you'll see in a minute that we're doing much better in the fall than we are in the spring for the domestic students. And our good news story with international students continues as well. You'll see that we are currently at 130% of our way to our target. And again, we had a fairly strong growth target for international students. Word of caution with that, note in the blue line at the bottom, it says paid. When I'm talking about domestic, I'm talking about confirmed and paid. With an international student, they'll pay their deposits. They'll put their money down on the table, but they don't have their study permit yet. So the number of students that actually get their study permit will be lower than this number, even though they've paid. So again, the fact that we're at 130% at this point in time is a very good news story. And in the end, we are going to exceed our target. I have every confidence we'll exceed our international student target. It just won't be 1,444. It will be some number slightly less because some students, even though IRCC processes their application on a timely basis, some number always get rejected for various reasons that of IRCC's choosing. So the next slide, please. So, and again, please note, it's early. It's March 1st. There'll be a lot of change in these fall numbers between now and even midsummer. But looking at the top, you'll see for domestic, a couple of things to note. Overall, our target for domestic, as I said, we learned a lot of lessons last year, and we set a more reasonable target for domestic enrollments for this year. So the target is 7,905, where last year we were over 8,000. And we are closer to that target at this point in time now than we were at the same point in time last year. So again, we've turned a corner with the domestic enrollments. We're finally getting to the point back where we're saying it seems likely at this point in time, it's early, that we're going to hit our domestic enrollment target for the fall. And the same good news story is going on with international. We are slightly ahead of where we were last year at this time with our international. But please note the difference here is our target is about 900 students more in international, and we're still closer to that target. So again, for the fall, things are looking really quite lovely at this point in time. Lots of work yet to be done, and Laura will talk about that in a few minutes. So that's my update, and I will turn it over to Laura now to give her update.
Great, thanks, Chris, and happy anniversary. Hope there's a palm tree or a lovely plant in your house tonight when you're celebrating. So yeah, Chris walked us through, if we can move, I think there's a next slide here that I'd like to talk about. Perfect. You know, our enrollment figures and how we're doing, and certainly we've had challenges wanting to rebuild our enrollment to our pre-COVID levels. So, but we know enrollment and retention is really everyone's responsibility. So, but the thing is, how do we do that best collectively? You know, and what we recognize is we need to create more collaboration and discussions and places for that to take place. So up on the screen here, you'll see that we've created this roadmap series, and hopefully you've seen some articles in MyAC. We have a very small working group on this, which will grow in time. And so there are some articles in MyAC, and they get promoted through Good Morning Algonquin. We have about an article a month. And what we've also started doing is tagging on these discussion series to go deeper into these topics and to talk and collaborate. And I'm really excited. We had our first one today, actually earlier today. There was over 50 people registered, and it was done virtually, but it was a very interactive discussion, and we plan to continue those. And I'm really excited about that opportunity, especially based on the participation today. So please watch for that, because we really only get to those numbers and then those retaining those students if we all sort of wrap our arms around it and move that forward. So please watch, and we look forward to you participating in that. Next slide, please. Student services, but I will focus because we don't want today all about us talking at you. We do want to get to the question and answer period. So just wanted to give you an update. If we go to the next slide, please. I wanted to focus on something Claude mentioned earlier. It is one of our major initiatives, major capital initiatives at the college, the R3 project. I see a number of R3 folks in the room today. Thank you. Good to see you. And I know there's more online. So I just wanted to give you a little update on what's going on there. So we are well into what's called the personalized phase. It's also known as the design and develop phase. And the R3 team continues to build understanding of the thesis student management system, the new system we're going towards, and the technical environment that is where it will live. And we've really reached some significant milestones that I'm really happy to share with you today. So as we work towards our new student information system, for example, we have successfully tested data exchange between thesis student management and Salesforce. And we know how much we all rely on Salesforce. Yay, I heard a little yay out there. Yeah, I say yay too. So this means what used to take hours will actually take minutes to exchange between the two, which is wonderful. Big objective of the project. And the integration also means that we will eliminate a lot of our re-entry processes, again, eliminating redundant tasks. So that's great. On top of that, our team has completed integration plans with other platforms that the college uses, our test center online booking system, TCOBS, as most of us refer to it, also our clockwork system, and this will allow students to book their own appointments or equipment as required, which is great for our students. Another integration we have done is to determine how our Private college public partnership enrollment data goes to our partners via Thesis SM. Again, seamless transactions, which is great. And there's been a lot of movement also on data migration as well. And so, for instance, the data team has migrated more than 1.8 million, yes, 1.8 million student course enrollment data into the new student information system. And we're also making headway on admissions data. We've migrated over 97,000 admission attempts. So you can see lots of activity happening. And you're probably wondering when will we get to go live on this system. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But the last note is also that our team is currently collaborating with the college, our own college human-centered design lab, which is great. 2 students from the human-centered design program are working with a principal investigator to connect with our students. So important that we ask students what they want to see. And so they're asking the question to our students, how can the college best support them once we do launch Access with the replacement of our new student information system? So more to come on that, but lots of collaboration, lots of things going on. And if we want to move to the next slide, and I do want to, sorry, just take a moment. You know, I rattled off a lot of figures there, but I do want to acknowledge the R3 team, all the people in the different departments who are collaborating and working with the R3 team, our change champions. There's a lot of people making this happen, and please, our appreciation is with you, and thank you for that. Yes. So with all that happening, you're wondering, you know, when will we go live? And I'm going to tell you part of the answer today is that we are moving along, and we will be going live sometime in 2025. And we would like to invite you to the R3 Showcase on May 1st to tell you exactly when we will be going live. So please join us. We've got a lot of demos there too. We just had, was it yesterday? We just had another R3 showcase. Lots of demos, lots of excitement about that as well. So come on May 1 and you'll find out when. Thanks. I'm going to turn it over to Dwayne now.
Okay, we'll go ahead. We'll just stay on this slide for a moment. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm pleased to announce that, re-announce that our annual budget for 23-24 was approved Monday night at the board meeting, and I'll provide a summary of the budget in just a few moments. But first, I'd like to thank all of you who submitted suggestions following the last town hall and on how we may resolve our budget challenges. Many of these suggestions were incorporated into the budget development that we had approved for the next year. And we reviewed all of the suggestions and organized them, and they really focused on 4 key themes: salary and benefits, given that's our most prominent expense in operating the college, programs and services, process improvements, and evidence-based budget projections and assumptions. So as we continue to improve our financial sustainability of the college, we will continue to reference these recommendations from our employees. So just before we get into the budget presentation, I just wanted to walk through a couple of slides to give some context. So if we go to the next slide. So as you know, colleges and universities in Ontario, we've been subject to a tuition freeze since 2019. That's when the ministry required us to reduce tuition by 10%, and then they froze it. And just to demonstrate the impact of our inability to adjust our prices, that is our tuition rates, to drive revenue and pay for inflationary costs, as a comparator, we've chosen a common household product, butter, to demonstrate the variance in price change over time. So as you can see on the graph, in 2015, a pound of butter would have cost $4.61 compared to 2022, where it costs $5.76. So a 25% increase. And I do realize it's on sale this week at Shoppers for $4.99, but this is based on average data. So just I know you can always find it cheaper. So a 25% increase, and yet due to our tuition policy that we're subject to, tuition for one term in our green architecture program in 2022 is 2% less than we would have charged in 2015. So domestic tuition revenue per student is less today for this program, but of course, all of our costs are higher than they were then. So just a little context. And on the next slide, I just wanted to speak to another element of our budget. So we're comparing our revenues in our budget for 23-24, the next fiscal year, with 2015-16. And Ontario Public Colleges are subject to a corridor funding model. So previously, up until about 2016, we had an operating grant model in that where we were funded for enrollment growth. So we brought in more students, we'd receive more funding. But that is no longer the case. We've moved to this operating grant model that is basically fixed. So no matter what the level of domestic enrollment, our operating grant is fixed at the value it was back in 2015-16. And while we haven't experienced domestic enrollment growth every year, Chris reviewed some of the more recent enrollment figures, there was modest growth in the latter half of the last decade, but we weren't funded for that growth. So there's a growing gap between our domestic tuition and our grant revenues compared to our operating costs. So as you can see, we are relying primarily on those international student premium revenues to address that gap. And you can see the variance between those two time periods on the graph there. And if we go to the next slide, so this wouldn't be a budget presentation without some pie graphs. Accountants love pie graphs. And the pie on the left breaks down our major revenue categories from 2015-16. And on the right, we compare to the approved budget for the next fiscal year. So just a couple of contrasts to note. So if you focus on the yellow pieces of the two pies, that represents our operating grant revenue. And you can see how significantly this revenue source has decreased relative to other revenues over this time period. So grants were 34% of our total revenues in 2015-16, but in this upcoming year, it's only 24% of our revenues. So, and that trend is expected to continue for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. So how are we making up that difference? Well, as you can see in the light green shading of the pie pieces, the international tuition premiums, they've grown from 6.7% of our total revenues back in 15-16 to 16.7% of our total revenues. So we are increasingly reliant, as every other public college is, on these international student premiums. So we'll go to the next slide, and I will start to present some of the annual budget highlights. And this is a slide that Emily Woods, our Director of Corporate Planning, presented to the board on Monday night as part of her budget presentation. And thank you to Emily and her team for preparing all of these slides too. We have a number of key assumptions and estimates presented that compare our current year third quarter projection values with the next year annual budget, just to give some relative reference. So if we just move to the first animation to highlight the speaking point, overall, we are budgeting for a 7.6% enrollment increase next year over Q3 this year. Breaking that down, we're planning for a more modest 1.3% domestic enrollment increase, as Chris had alluded to earlier, and a 27.2% international enrollment increase, which is about half the rate of growth we had planned for a year ago. Next animation, just to highlight the public college private partnership enrollment. We are planning for close to 4 times the enrollment levels we experienced this year, our first year of operation. But we do feel confident the demand's there, and our partner CDI can accommodate this growth with our collaboration. And the next animation will highlight that what I noted earlier. We're not planning on any increases for our domestic tuition fee rates or the operating grant. And the next animation will highlight that given our experience this past year, we have budgeted for a larger contingency provision to offset a degree of any enrollments that may fall short of our budget expectations and to address other unanticipated costs. And the final animation is just highlighting our bottom line. On a cash flow basis, we are projecting a deficit of $11.4 million. And the very bottom row identifies our planned net contribution on an accounting basis, so under our accounting standards basis. And if you just move to I think there's one more animation. There we go. Yeah, thank you. And now we can move to the next slide, and this is my second last slide. So here we presented to the board a 3-year forecast of the net contribution of the operating and capital budget segments on a cash flow basis. So the first operating budget segment, if we just hit that animation button, is for our funded activity and college operations. And as you can see, we have been realizing an operating deficit with this activity. Now, just over 10 years ago, college administration committed to the board that we would balance our funded activity revenues with our expenses. And we had met this commitment up until a couple of years ago when the pandemic hit, and the full effects of the tuition freeze and the operating grant model were realized. So we are focused on returning to a balanced position. And as you can see, the 3 other operating activities, contract activity, campus services, and the International Education Center, are projected to produce sufficient positive net cash flow to offset the funded activity deficit. So this is critical to ensure we have resources to fund our strategic investment priorities. And if you go to the next animation, just to highlight that overall, the cash investments needed for our SIP investments exceed our college operating cash flow. So we are projected to be cash flow negative for the next 2 years, but plan to get back to a balanced position in that 3rd year. And then finally, just on the next slide, I wanted to note that, again, just to reemphasize the need to produce strong positive cash flow from operations to fund much of our strategic investment priorities to support our learners of today and tomorrow. So from this list, you can see that we have requirements to invest in technology applications, facilities and infrastructure, equipment, and strategic initiatives. And the key priority investment is the R3 project that Laura just gave us an update on. And just to note, there are no capital grants available for an investment like that. So that's a $70 million investment over multiple years that we really have to fund from our own cash flow. So that's a big challenge that we have to deal with. And but we have a lot of other good value-added initiatives that will help us restore financial sustainability. And that concludes my presentation. Of course, we'll have an opportunity to take questions and discussion a little bit later. But now I'll turn it over to David Soltis.
A little bit lower. Thank you, Dwayne. Hope my voice holds up. I was actually at the game last night cheering on the Sens, which is tough to do when you're a Leaf fan. Hey, I'm always honored to be part of the President Town Hall event, especially when there's an opportunity to share the great work that's being done in human resources. Behind Diane McCutcheon, Aaron Langevin, and myself is an amazing team that goes above and beyond daily to make employee experience a priority. And you will see a snapshot today of some great programs and initiatives that are critical to the success of our employees here at the college. So we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. We'll start off our HR update with a focus on employment equity census, which is currently in flight. I want to start off with a big thank you to everyone who had a chance to respond to the survey. We're currently at a response rate of 75% for our target audience, and our target is 80%. So we're getting really close to achieving our goal. The information shared by you through this initiative will help to deepen our understanding of barriers experienced by employees as part of our efforts to build an inclusive college. It will also support our ability to measure progress towards improving diversity so that our workforce representation represents that of our communities. And finally, it will enable compliance with provisions in the federal contractors program, which the college is a part of. For those who have not yet had an opportunity to complete your survey, it can be located within Workday. It's easy to access and has been really effectively configured with our partners in information technology services to ensure confidentiality and security. The survey will be open until March 3rd. And if you have any questions, you can send an email to diversity@algonquincollege.com or visit our dedicated webpage, which has our frequently asked questions. I believe some of those links will be posted actually to the chat as well, and hopefully will go out post-event. So if we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So the next topic I'd like to cover is what Claude had mentioned at the outset, which is the refresh of our inclusion and diversity blueprint. Within our 22-25 strategic plan, Goal 3 states we will create an equitable, diverse, and inclusive work environment. This goal was foundation to the creation of our 23-26 inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility blueprint. And of course, when you apply that acronym, it reads IDEA, which the team embraced and took to heart. Our process to develop that multi-year blueprint included consultations with senior leaders and college stakeholders, which helped really to gain insights on our current state and future areas of focus. Our team also leveraged interviews and a benchmarking tool to assess how the college was performing across 13 areas, which included leadership, structure, recruitment, learning, and flexibility as a few examples. This provided line of sight on where the college was doing well and where there were opportunities for growth and improvement. Finally, we identified tactics through a community engagement campaign, which enabled experiences and voices of hundreds of our employees, which were captured through survey results and a 5-week online community dialogue campaign, engagement events, and finally, insights from the Inclusion and Diversity Circle. We are proud to share the 23-26 blueprint, which lays out our multi-year plan for creating a culture of inclusion in our work environment. Thank you to all the employees who added their thoughts and voices to this plan, and the Inclusion and Diversity Circle for seeing it through to fruition. We'll go to the next slide. Thank you. A little bit of a deeper dive here on the blueprint. Our journey is grouped into 3 areas of focus: capacity building, robust conversations, and workforce recruitment. Through capacity building, we'll seek to enhance stability of our leadership and workforce to thrive in an inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible work environment. We'll seek to build on our strong foundation to address some important gaps and evolving needs. Tactics will include creating new training programs to support frontline employees and responding to racism, continuing the inclusion and infusions ethical upstandard training, and promoting the Introduction to Inclusion and Diversity at Algonquin College course to employees and new hires. Our second area, robust conversations, seeks to drive change by engaging our workforce in constructive dialogue. This will require that we gain an increased level of comfort with discussing diversity and inclusion-related topics, as these conversations are not always easy. There needs to be safe space and openness to share our experiences and a willingness to acknowledge those experiences which may be different from our own. Tactics will include the creation of employee resource groups and action planning arising from the results of the equity census. This is fundamental to solidifying our shared commitment to action for an inclusive work environment. Finally, we will focus on workforce recruitment process to enhance the college's ability to attract and recruit diverse talent. A diverse, qualified workforce who reflects the full range of age, gender, race, culture, differently abled, as a few examples, will be critical to bringing different perspectives together and creating the needed innovation to be successful at the college. This area will build tactics that will solidify our staffing practices within HR professionals, managers, and members of hiring panels. Next slide, please. Our blueprint is a plan which includes our vision for design and build of an inclusive future for all college employees. By 2026, we aspire to see an Algonquin College where our workforce reflects the world around us. Our people are proud and confident in their individual identities and trusting enough to identify themselves. Any of our employees who see hurtful interactions in our work environment, as well as those who experience them, have the comfort and skills to take action and influence positive change. And finally, our events, resources, and networks prompt us to challenge ourselves and learn together in safe spaces. We will use the building blocks of the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Plan to construct an Algonquin College welcoming for people of all backgrounds and characteristics. This blueprint is only the design, and it will take actions and commitment of all of us to succeed. We'll be planning additional communication and events around our blueprint over the next several months, and we encourage all employees to learn more about our multi-year plan. I'll now turn over to Erin Langevin, Director of Employee Labor Relations, who will provide an update on wellness and abilities.
Thanks. Next slide, please. The Wellness and Abilities team within Human Resources continues to be thoughtful and work diligently with an overall focus on employee well-being at the college with a variety of resources and personal support. On the left-hand side of this slide are some of the highlights of resources and events from this past year that were offered to the college community through the Wellness and Abilities team. The Psychological Health and Safety Project work is in partnership with Gallagher Consulting. Year one of this project included an executive overview and completion of a psychological safety audit to assess existing policies, practices, and to create a baseline analysis for measuring and monitoring employee well-being. In year 2 or 3 of this plan, we will be further developing a multi-year workforce planning framework, systems and processes to optimize and measure employee well-being in the workplace will be executed. We're also very proud of our annual January Blue Monday event. This year marked the 4th annual event with Kate Davis. We had many employees attend this event virtually and received a lot of positive feedback. And of course, employees are looking forward to this event again next year. On a continuing basis, our team offers employee learning that offers targeted pieces on employee wellness under financial, mental, social, and physical factors. There have been additions to our new hire orientation to enhance and support employee wellness. And as well, we are offering monthly wellness office hours to support our employees as it relates to absences, accommodation, and wellness resources. We are excited to continue to offer many initiatives in this coming year. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see what our current plans are. We're continuing our work with Gallagher Consulting as related to employee well-being. We will be launching employee and people training as a next step in this plan. This initiative will become a part of our employee and management academy programs, and it's just one of the many ways the college continues to support our continued commitment to employee well-being and fostering a culture that promotes psychological well-being. I'll turn it back over to you, David.
Thank you, Erin. And just to conclude the HR update, we'll go to the next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. We want to provide advanced awareness of the upcoming employee engagement survey that will launch on March 20th. From an engagement journey perspective, our last full survey actually took place back in November of 2019 with our partner Metrics at Work. Results were shared with the college community at a town hall event in February of 2020, and action planning was initiated, but unfortunately there was impacts due to COVID-19. Despite that disruption, a cross-functional employee engagement team was formed and assessed the data and established priority areas, which included development and recruitment, and that employee engagement team, cross-collaboration team continues to meet even to today. In January of 2021, the college undertook an interim measure to gather employee experience insights by conducting a pulse survey focused on psychological safety, remote work, and the college's response during the pandemic. Departmental area reports were shared with members of the Algonquin College leadership team, who then in turn implemented initiatives within their respective departments. Additionally, the data served as a valuable input into the flexible work arrangements pilots and subsequent policy, which went live in August of last year. So we're now happy to announce that we'll be launching our full engagement survey to gain insights on the connection employees have towards their work, their team, and the college. We're seeking your input on a number of critical areas, including training and development, work-life balance, communication, diversity and inclusion, and departmental and organizational engagement. The employee engagement survey will launch on March 20th to all active employees at the college, and it will then close on April 12th. Our plan is to share the results at a college community dedicated town hall event, likely sometime in June and July. And of course, we'll follow up this town hall up with a memo to be sent out next week via HR, which will provide more information. So please make your voices heard and share your thoughts, as your input is critical to our success. That concludes the HR update. I believe I'll now turn it over to our moderator, Alana McDonnell.
Thank you. You know, I think the events team actually wanted to get the Prime Minister to moderate today, but his security detail was too busy, so they got me instead. You got me for the next hour and a half or so. Unfortunately, I left my security detail at home. Rosie and Russell are my super sweet huskies that are my security detail. But good news is you don't get dog hair all over you. So here we go. My name is Alana McDonald, and I'm the Director of Marketing and Recruitment. I am the lucky second place person to be the moderator for this afternoon's question and answer period, AKA Q&A. I know we love our acronyms, so I'm just going to call it Q&A from now on. So we've reached that fun time in the agenda, and before we get there, I'll just start with some best practices so that we can make the most of our time. For those of you online, please ask your question live by raising your virtual hand. When called upon, you'll be able to unmute yourself and turn your camera on via the magic of Zoom to ask your question live. You can also ask your question to the Q&A tab. So I will be looking for all of those different types of questions from you. For those of you in the room, simply raise your real hand and we will bring over a real mic for you. Or you can throw your coffee cup on the ground, whatever you prefer. I'm easy. I'll roll with the punches here. I will take one question at a time to ensure everybody gets their chance to ask a question. That means no part Bs, no second parts, no additionally I wanted to knows, or no follow-ups. We're just going to keep it to one simple and easy question. And if there's time, we'll circle back to make sure you get that question in and allow everybody else to take part in this event. So we all know the Algonquin College values of caring, learning, integrity, and respect. So we'll keep those top of mind when we're asking questions. We want, as we've heard earlier from David Solstice, we want this to be a safe and inclusive space for everyone. So I hope you'll heed that. And let's get going with a first question. Do we have anybody in the audience here that wants to put their hand up? In front of me? Oh, I see a hand waving. It's a beautiful hand with a nice watch. Please stand. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Majida. I'm new here, HR project coordinator. I work with Maureen and the compensation team and benefits. My question is, the president mentioned everyone should be involved about taking students in and retaining students in the campus. My question is, what's the process about that? How is information shared to make sure that everyone participates in getting students in? I'm a Nigerian. I have Nigerian friends in WhatsApp groups talking about how do they get admission into the college. I have a friend who asked me when I started working here. So how does this work? Thank you.
Wonderful question. How do we all get involved?
Right, is it on? Yeah, yeah, okay, great. I love your question. Thank you for asking that. And there could be a lot of answers to what you just asked. And that's one of the reasons why we want to expand our working group and let you know where you can connect with your questions, because it's a really large, as you've probably discovered, place that has many doors and many questions where you can bring your questions. So I would say, first and foremost, we try and narrow down the question. What is the need of the student, or what is the interest? We have, for example, counselors here who provide program choice. We have recruiters, student recruiters here in Alana's area that provide a lot of information, can give campus tours. We have student support services who also offer a lot of services, and retention teams that can help students navigate. So part of what I was talking about is opening up these conversations so that there are places in the college for employees to explore further and to really understand and find out what those mechanisms are and how they themselves can help and play a part or get involved. So I would encourage you, perhaps the first step is you can simply reach out to me after this and I will start you on that journey. And after that, for anyone else too, watch watch for these opportunities. And we want to build this momentum as much as possible, because great things happen when we collaborate together and when we know what the processes are and what the systems are. So I really thank you for asking the question.
And just adding a little bit to what Laura said, great. Laura's doing a wonderful job in trying to organize activities, trying to get people to think about this. There are so many answers to that question, and we're not going to take all day to give you every single answer. It's about helping to recruit students. It's about helping to help students make decisions once they've been offered enrollment to actually decide to come. There are open houses. There are any number of ways to get involved in getting students in to the college. But our job is to help them be successful while they're here as well. And every single opportunity to interact with a student is an opportunity to improve retention. Walking down the corridor is an opportunity to improve retention. Just to be able to look a student in the eye, smile, and say hello, to make that a warm, welcoming experience where students feel they belong at the institution. So there are many, many, many ways to participate and to help, many big, many small, but talk to Laura, she'll help you down the path.
Thank you, Laura and Chris. And I'll also put a plug in for our campus tours. So if you go to the website and you know somebody that is interested in coming to the college, suggest they come to a campus tour. Once they come and see the wonderful facilities that we have at our campuses, it really makes a difference in their decision making. So I'll just, because I have the microphone, I'll add that plug. And we will go over to the raised yellow hands, and Catherine H. We will get you unmuted, and if you like, you can turn your camera on and we'll take your question. Okay, all right. So then we'll just move to Sean Pentecost.
Hello, I don't think it's giving me an option to turn my camera on, and probably not a bad thing because I don't think I'm really camera ready.
Okay, thank you.
Recovering from a cold. So
Yeah.
thank you. So my question actually has to do with Dwayne's presentation. It might not be Dwayne who answers it, but it's what sparked my question. The question is, looking at the financials, and when we're looking at the international enrollment, and even more specifically, the increase with our public-private partnership, which we know caters to international students. And we've seen some negative press recently about some of these not going so well. I'm just wondering, is there anything that we are aware of with the government to address the funding issue? Or is the government looking at continuing to create a system where we have to rely so much on international students? Because based on the presentation, it appears to me that if that was to dry up tomorrow, we'd be in big trouble. So I'm just wondering if there's any insight coming from the government that they may be looking at how they fund us differently. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Test. Oh, I'm on. Hi, Sean, it's Claude. Yes, I'll take that question, and I'll invite members of the panel afterward to chime in. We are certainly advocating through Colleges Ontario, through Linda Franklin and her team, with a committee of presidents to the government to improve the situation. It's our #1 priority right now, is seek a different funding model that is more sustainable for the future. And one of the things that is on the docket right now is the formation of a blue ribbon panel that will be looking at a number of elements that have already been spoken to by Dwayne: tuition framework, the corridor model, and perhaps other elements that are part of the larger equation of financial sustainability of post-secondary institutions. This is, I think the Blue Panel will address things beyond college system. It will probably address universities and colleges, but that's what's being planned right now. And as a result of that, there is not a lot of decisions that will be made in the near future because everybody's saying we're going to wait for the Blue Panel to produce its report and its recommendations. So that's where we are right now. Does that help address the question you raised, Sean?
Sorry. Yes, it does. Thank you, Claude.
Sean, I hope you're feeling better. Okay, let's go over to the Q&A, and I will read a question from Jill in Police Foundations. Is there any movement on aligning the minimum grade requirement for external transfer credits with internal transfer credits? Currently, this impacts advanced standing student applications.
Krista, would you mind taking a first stab at that?
I'm happy to try because really my answer is going to be, Jill, thank you for identifying this. I wouldn't say I haven't heard, but I'm unclear exactly what the implications are. So I already wrote it down. I think it sounds important to address, and thank you. I wish I could provide something extra. I don't know, Maggie is also available if she nope, she's shaking her head no.
Nothing to add, thanks,
But
Kristen.
thank you, Jill. I just want to make sure I understand it, and I don't want to try and answer in a way that's not thoughtful. So thank you. I'll reach out.
Excellent, thanks, Krista. Okay, let's go back to our room, and we have a hand up. Excellent. We'll bring over that mic. Just ask you to stand. Perfect, thank you.
Hello. I was just reading about, my name's Lauren Jatana. I'm working at the ACWA office. So I was reading that the government's switching to performance-based funding with 10 metrics. So I feel like I haven't heard anything today about that. I'm curious how we're preparing for that.
Mark Leduc, would you take a first stab at how we're doing on SMA 3?
Absolutely, Chris. Thanks for the question. So currently right now we're in year 3 of the SMA. It's a 5-year strategic mandate agreement. And because of the situation with COVID, the government has actually put a hold harmless period on performance-based funding just to allow colleges essentially to get through the pandemic and the impacts on enrollment. So currently there's been no impact to our funding because of that hold harmless period at this point in time. Again, we're waiting to see what the government is going to decide in terms of year 4 and 5 for the SMA, but we're waiting to hear on that.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for jumping in. Awesome to get these data questions from ACWA. I'm not shocked at all. Okay, let's go to our participants with their hand up. And I see Judy Pruitt. I'm sorry if I'm saying your last name wrong, but let's get Judy unmuted and we'll hear her question.
Thank you. I should be unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to ask a question. I guess it's going to be to Chris, probably. We've started a dialogue, Chris, about issues related to course renewal. And we've continued to receive questions from faculty members who have noted that various issues that you recognized and presented during the memo where you granted course renewal time as a result of COVID still apply now with faculty teaching 2.5 semesters. So I'm hoping you might have an update for us and give us an indication of your thoughts on reintroducing course renewal time for faculty.
Thank you, Judy. I know you and I have been having some email conversations and are about to meet in person to discuss a little bit further. These are conversations that I have been having with the academic leadership team and re-examining that whole question and recognizing that when a number of factors changed all at once. And when we went to a 14-week term and began to incorporate 35 weeks of teaching into a full-time faculty member's teaching load, that the period formerly known as the May-June period, where many faculty had a period of time that they could spend on course renewal and professional development, that time became more limited. We had been working under some expectations that we would be utilizing carefully other non-teaching periods during the year for that time, but have also come to realize, particularly through the pandemic, that we may need to revisit that decision. And so I and my team are revisiting that decision, and I do expect that we will be addressing that and coming forward with a new approach and a new plan that I'm hoping to talk with you about sometime soon. That would be in place by the fall. So we are working on it, and more to come soon. I don't have a firm answer as to what it will look like at this point.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Looking forward to the continued dialogue.
Thanks, Judy. Okay, let's go over to our question board. Zachary has a question. Is there any talk of opening up the flexible work policy to allow support staff the ability to temporarily work out of province?
Hi, Elaine. I'll
Hi.
take this one. Thank you. Flexible work arrangement policy, that's HR 26. Maybe I'll just start off with some quick stats. 768 positions out of 1769 have actually adopted a flexible arrangement. So just want to start off with seeing great adoption of that policy. The section you're referencing is actually section 3, which describes the various types of flexible work arrangements. And we basically have two types. We have flexible work, fully remote, and within there, local and non-local, and then we have hybrid. Per our current policy, support employees are not eligible to work out of country nor outside the province at this time, and there's various elements that are tied to that require us to hold that parameter in place at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Okay, is there anybody in the room that wants to put their hand up? Oh, go ahead, Christine. We'll get you a mic.
Hi, I think this is probably for Diane or David, but I would be interested in hearing about the the workforce planning business plan that I know is ongoing from a just concerned about workload that I'm still hearing a lot about. So I'd be interested in how that's going and where we're at with it, please.
Switchfoot, thank you. Thanks very much, Christine, for that question. I think it may also hit one of the other questions that's coming up in the Q&A, but we'll address kind of both of them at the same time. So last year in 22-23, and David, I'm going to ask you to fill in some details, but last year in 22-23, we created a framework as one of our business plan goals and strategic workforce planning. We piloted with 2 different areas. One, to get a proof of concept in the academic area. And essentially what it was to do was to give us a model to predict what our workforce should be with the work that we have to undertake. So that was done in the nursing studies area. The other proof of concept was done in campus services, and it was from an administrative side to figure out how do you quantify the number of employees that you need in order to be able to do the work. That's my layman terms. I know you have more of the consultant information that we got working with our partners in Deloitte. So what we're doing now in 23-24 in the business plan that we had approved is broadening this proof of concept now. We now have the framework. We now understand how to put it in place. And we're wanting to then put it in place in 3 more areas, David? 3 more areas. 3 more areas in the, okay, you better stand up and tell the actual specifics.
No, exactly. We're going to be expanding, and this is what strategic workforce planning is really, it will be a journey. It really will. And those pilots provided so much great learning, both in looking at how you plan resources based upon historical data and future requirements, and then projecting skills of the future. So Really what we'll be doing in 23-24 for sure, we'll be expanding the pilots and tools to 3 additional areas of the college. And of course, we'll work with various stakeholders to identify from a priority perspective where we go next. But absolutely, really tremendous amount of learning through those pilots in nursing and campus services. And if I could, I heard the capacity question as well. And it's a multi-dimensional problem. It has a lot of moving parts to it. We think about processes. How can we automate further? Our people, do they have the right skills? Are we seeing a growth in services? Are we seeing incremental new services being added, and how do we factor, the resourcing requirements to really put that in flight so it could be delivered successfully? And I would say it's likely a department by department situation that needs to be looked at. It's not a one-size-fit-all solution. But as we've heard, we're pulling a number of levers, including strategic workforce planning, which is a start. It's one of many levers we're trying to pull. And I know we've been working with on the budget officer tactics and trying to streamline work in that area. And the other piece I want to mention too is AC Way. And so we've recently staffed our AC Way office. It's a small but mighty team, but I think they will play a good role in helping some process development, process excellence. And then finally, when it comes to capacity, it's about dialogue and discussion. So I encourage employees to have discussions with people leaders and their teams to really take a look at the situation.
And I just want to touch on Janice Price's. I know I'm jumping ahead, but it was on the same topic. So if you don't mind, Janet asked, it was mentioned that Chris that we be aggressively growing the international market for the next 5 years. What supports will be there to also grow the staff that would be needed to make this happen, and to also support those students once they are here. So from my HR perspective, it is my belief that the strategic workforce planning tool will help us with that. It will help us with understanding what's the growth, and then how do we staff that appropriately. So I wanted to touch on that, Janice. There may be more to that question that you would want to have answered from Chris. Can I give it to him right now?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm just jumping ahead.
That's all right.
Thanks, Dan. Apparently she wants to moderate the next one. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
It's a great question, and there's lots of moving pieces to that. And so there's the workforce planning aspect. We need to ensure that the people that are interacting with our students are doing so in a way that works for our students. Our faculty, our student success specialists, everybody that's working with our students needs to be prepared to create that environment in which these students feel they belong. Which means understanding where they're coming from, what their needs are, and being prepared to offer the supports that are reasonable to expect them to need to be successful here. And so we have work that we are undertaking. This is not something we are ignoring. I know that, for example, the faculty, there is a growing body of support within learning and teaching services on creating a culturally diverse classroom and how to work in that environment. That sort of training is available for others as well. And I know that the student services, I'm going to ask Laura in just a minute to touch on that, but it's not just what happens in the classroom, it's the entire student experience that we need to be prepared for before we end up doubling the number of international students we have over the next number of years. A lot of work, we're not ignoring it, we're not going into it with our eyes closed, and we are trying to ensure that the appropriate supports and appropriate resources are in place as those students are arriving. And Laura, did you have anything you wanted to add?
One little piece to that. We are in anticipation of this international student enrollment growth, preparing, I don't know if Ben Bridgestock's here in the audience or he's virtual. One of his items this year was to develop, by March or April of this year, international student roadmap in terms of what do we need to do and get in place, and what type of services do we need to augment for this anticipated and planned growth of our international students. What we don't have is a specific formula. If we bring X students, we will need Y resources. And so, you know, some of this will be learning as we do. However, I want to impart that there's very specific planning moving forward to help us know what we should be delivering and then how we properly resource that. So I'm not going to go on and on, but hopefully you get the point that we're thinking and doing, and we don't expect that we can't, you know, that we'll need to do things differently and resource differently if we have a growing international student population. Oh, okay. And Chris just reminded me, this is part of the work I'm doing to get everyone involved in the discussion. So thank you, Chris. Okay, I don't know, Christy, I know we sort of went over into some other topics. So I'm going to circle back because you started the question and I don't know if your question has been answered. So I'll go back to you. Okay, Christine might ask another question later.
That's great. And I'm lucky to be on some steering committees with Christine, and she often brings up this conversation of capacity and how we're supporting our employees. So always essential to have Christine around the table. Okay, let's go over to Tara, who asked a question on the board. The pandemic highlighted the interdependence on international markets, on domestic economy and its risks. Is this volatility and market sensitivity included in the budgeted projections for international students?
All right, Tara, let me take a first stab at that. And the way I'm interpreting that question, one of the things that we are doing, and we know we're working very hard to grow our international enrollments. And we know that one of the easiest markets to draw those international students from is India. And China's a ways behind. However, we cannot rely solely on single or a few large markets. And so the international recruiting team is actively diversifying where we are trying to draw students from. So we are working very hard in Southeast Asia, particularly in Vietnam, the Philippines, South America. We're moving into Africa. We're trying very hard to not be reliant on a single or a few small let me try that again. One or two markets to draw from. China and India could not be considered small. So if that was the intent of your question, great. And I don't know if any of my colleagues have anything to add. Dwayne wants to add something.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, a little bit further to that question, Tara, when I presented the summary of the annual budget, you might recall I referenced the contingency provision of about $5.6 million. So that's a larger than usual contingency we've built into the budget for this coming year. And we've taken, been a little more conservative on our enrollment projections. But in the event that we do not achieve those enrollment projections, we have that contingency to offset that. So that's part of how we've addressed the volatility, in addition to Chris's points.
Thanks, Dwayne. Okay, Jessica Scallon, you have your hand up. So let's get you unmuted to ask your question. Yeah, just give it an unmute in the bottom left corner. Okay, Jessica, if we can get this worked out, maybe we can circle back to you in a little bit, or feel free to add your question in the Q&A if we're struggling there. Okay, let's go back to the room. Any questions in the room here? Anybody want to put a real hand up? Okay, well, we have more than enough questions in the Q&A board, so let's go back to the Q&A board. All right, another sort of angle on workload. I'll read the question from Jess. Can we please have an update about the support staff workload concerns that have been brought up over the last several years? concerns surrounding the inequity across the college where people are doing the same work but in different job titles with different pay scales and volumes of work. Managers are the ones being asked to solve the inequity, but differences in managers is how the situation got to its current state. I know some people are kept in the loop, but it'd be great if any progress could be shared at a college-wide level since this affects a large number of employees. Diane?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jess, for that question. So beginning of January, Chris Jansen and myself met with Christine and members of the budget officer workload group. And we talked about, it was about 80% of the short-term initiatives and recommendations that had come forward from the workload group had been implemented. And we started to talk through what worked, what didn't work. How do we start getting metrics on implementing some of these things? Is it meeting the desired output of the recommendations? Are we seeing capacity being created with some of these initiatives? And we got some mixed opinions back about some were good, others created perhaps a little bit more work than what was anticipated. So that feedback was then brought back to the executive team. But we were really wanting to focus on, look, we have done some of these things. Is it working? Or are we all spinning our wheels? And so we had that conversation. And then from that commitment, we said, we're going to meet on a quarterly basis because it's important to us to continue that dialogue. And the next one will be coming up in April. And Dwayne McNair has also asked to join that update so that Chris and myself and Dwayne would be talking again with that group to say, where are we at now with our progress? The next topic of conversation was the medium and the longer term goals and recommendations that came forward from the work group. And I think that's where it gets into that second part of your comment about the concerns about the inequity of workload. So the medium and the longer term recommendations was to really look at the structure, of the jobs that have budget as a component. Now, across the college, budget officers are called many, many different titles as they have different assigned duties. Chris and I asked if we could implement something in that January meeting, if we could implement something that helps with pay, would that help your workload? And there was 4 of the work group members there, and 2 of them raised their hands because they had responsibility to help with the payroll for other than full-time faculty. And the other 2 did not have that assigned responsibility. So even efforts that we would have made from a payroll, creating efficiencies and doing some of those processes would have only impacted, out of that small group, 2 out of the 4. So it's important then to start looking at what is the assigned work. That's a college-wide initiative. And unfortunately, that medium and long-term goal was not able to be undertaken in 22-23. We are continuing to have discussions about that broader, how do we undertake this? And I do believe this is something that we need to have done before our thesis goes live, because it's the same people. And we heard that loud and clear in that conversation and in other conversations that we've been having through the Change Champions, through the R3 project. Some of that information we've been hearing at our ACLT meetings has been identifying what perhaps could be some of the transient work that will happen with that project, and what will be some of the net new work, and what will be some of the efficiencies that will go away. So when we start thinking about this from a college-wide perspective, they are things that we're very much talking about and considering, in addition to addressing some of the current work assignments and the workload. I think that was addressing some of the second part. And then the third part of your comment is it would be great if a progress could be shared at the college-wide level. And that's a really good point. I should not have assumed that our conversation would have been enough. I think you're right. We should have a communicate out to the budget officers directly, and I'll undertake that so that everyone has the same information. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Diane. Okay, let's go to Martin Lee, who has his hand up. I'll ask Martin to unmute.
Hi, folks. I hope people can hear me. There's a
Yes, yes, we
perfect.
can. Perfect.
So the college, Truth and Reconciliation is obviously a big issue at the college. I know that it's certainly vocalized as being central to much of what we do. I've noticed that there's been some openings in the TRI office, and I was wondering what the college's plans were to ensure that there was good leadership in that space.
Thank you. And Claude.
Test, yes. Hi, Martin, Claude here. So I've undertaken two things. One is to understand more the works of the Indigenous Education Council, and that work is underway, and I'm having conversation with Indigenous communities on how we move forward on our initiatives related to indigenization at the college. And what I've said to the team is that form follows function, where I want to understand where are the most needed gaps to be filled and where the opportunities lie. And then we'll be putting a plan together to address this. So I have 2 more consultations and engagement sessions to do with communities. And following that, I will be putting together with our team a what will look like the revised structure for Truth and Reconciliation, and then announcing that. So in terms of a timeline, we're looking at probably end of April, and then proceeding to hire for the position. But I wanted to make sure we were clear on where we were headed first in terms of Indigenous initiatives. And what I've said to the group, and I'll say it again here, is that it is upon all of us to reconcile. It is upon all of us to take steps towards indigenization. And it's important to me that the burden does not fall on few shoulders, but that it is a shared responsibility. And as a result, I want to make sure that the initiatives that are adopted going forward are at the approach of bundled arrows, where together we can do this work in a multitude of department and units where indigenization can flourish. I'll give you an example. We've moved the Mamadosan Center back to student services. And so under Laura's leadership and her team, they have responsibility for supporting Indigenous learners at the college. Currently, Mark Savenkoff is overseeing the efforts of the TRI team with respect to partnerships that include also Indigenous partnerships with communities. So that's the kind of approach that I'm looking to establish across multitude of departments. So it's not just one area where everybody says, thank God, it's taken care of, it's over here. We all have a responsibility in this regard, and that's how it's going to be framed going forward. Does that help answer your question, Martin?
It certainly does. Thank you. Maybe, do you have an idea of a timeline, maybe?
Well, what I've said is that I'm continuing with the consultations with communities that will take place over the next, I would say, couple of weeks. Then formulation of the framework, and then announcing that, and then hiring into the position. So it probably, the structure will be announced end of April, but the hiring may take a month or 2, so likely will be end of May, early June before we have somebody in place.
Thank you so very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks, Claude. Thanks, Martin. Okay, let's go over to the Q&A board and take Peggy's question. When I started working here, there was always lines of buses out front of C Building bringing high school students in for tours. I know there are general open houses coming up, or people can go online and sign up for a tour, but I'm wondering if we're working to get those high school class trips going again. As a parent of a grade 11 student, I am discouraged by the information and promotion being done by post-secondary institutions at the high schools post-COVID. Some of these students need to be led to water. Shall I throw it over to me? It's a great question, Peggy. I loved it when we saw all of those buses outside at our open houses. One of the things that we did pre-COVID was we had open houses during the work week. And one of the struggles we had was that the actual labs and classes were not accessible for people to actually go in and see what the experience would be like in their program. Sometimes they peeked in windows, but it wasn't the full experience. We also had troubles at the academic tables because the staff were teaching and they couldn't, staff their tables. So that was one factor when we were thinking about when do we have our open houses, and those bus loads of kids typically came in for the open house. So in November, we had an open house on the weekend. And I'm really proud to say that there was traffic all the way out to the Queensway to get to our open house in November. It was really well attended. We work very closely with the high schools. We have 3 recruiters assigned to a variety of they each have about 90 high schools that are within their portfolio, and they visit, they do presentations, they set up tables, they're constantly there, and they have invited the guidance counselors to bring students to campus for tours. And we do those tours sort of on a one-off basis rather than having them come all at once. So we're trying to personalize the relationship a little bit with the schools to really understand what the students are looking for, and then we can kind of make the tour that will resonate for them. We do have some tours coming up over the March break time, which is typical for the direct audience, where they can come in and see the campus. So we're looking forward to that. Right now, when we look at our numbers for actually both spring and fall, direct is really holding its own. Where we struggle most is the non-direct, and that's basically 75% of our student audience is non-direct. So offering these open houses and these events on times outside of the work week is essential in order to bring in all of those students, that area where we're specifically a little bit challenged. So we do that with that audience in mind. We try and put up posters and all those fun things in schools to get them here on the weekend. But I will extend to anybody on this call, if you have a grade 11 student, if you have a grade 12 student that wants to come in for a tour, connect with our recruitment team, because it could be a tour, it could be us connecting you to a chair that can talk about the program and answer some questions. And it could be coming in for a tour as well. We have them all the time, and when they're in smaller groups, again, they can be a little bit more personalized to the type of programs that you want to see around the college. So thanks, Peggy, for that question. We are always looking at ways to try and engage both our direct and non-direct audiences. And I agree, they need to be led to water. I have a grade 12 student, by the way, who's coming here next year, who hasn't confirmed. So I know. Anyway, so I feel for you. And I thank you for your question. Oh boy, Gavin. All right. Any questions? Oh, I see a hand up. Scott, we'll just get you a microphone and we'll get you to stand up. Awesome.
Okay, thank you. I think this is a SEM question, and I know that domestic student corridor funding model has been giving institutions fits for the last number of years. Dwayne sort of alluded to us being either at the top range or above that corridor, and that's sort of like where the Sens are, where if they don't make the playoffs, and they don't value the draft for next year. So it's a tough situation. So are we indeed at that top range or above? And are we doing anything, or do we expect for domestic us to be in a better position in the future, and can we do anything about this situation?
All right, I think Chris will answer, but we expect the answer to include a hockey analogy. He handed the microphone away. I'm just joking.
No, thanks, Scott. I'm going to quickly turn this over to Mark in just a second. But the corridor funding, here. Fortunately, I had the lid on my mug. The corridor funding itself, there's a ceiling and there's a floor. And the way it works is for any funded student, translated domestic student, if our total enrollment is between the ceiling and the floor, we get the same grant funding, period. And until your question around the performance metrics, until that actually kicks in, then the whole story changes again. But right now, and this is what I want Mark to confirm more for me, we're kind of at the center point at the moment, and maybe just a little bit below that center point. So at this point in time, we're in no danger of going above, and we're in no danger of going below. But Mark, did you want to add some detail to that?
Yeah, for sure, Chris. And I don't really have a good hockey analogy to tie into this, but yeah. So basically, as Chris mentioned,
though, Mark.
There is a ceiling, there is a floor, and then there's a midpoint. And essentially, right now, we are essentially at our midpoint for corridor funding. When we look at kind of the next 5 years, with what we think we're going to have from a domestic perspective, we're going to probably stay within that midpoint. As Chris mentioned, as long as you stay within that ceiling and floor, no funding implications. If you go below the floor, that's when you start to lose money, essentially, lose funding. The other, I'll call it complexity to all of this, is of course you've got corridor funding, which is kind of an envelope of funding, and then you have performance-based funding, which is another envelope. And over the next number of years, the proportions of those are going to shift. So more to performance-based, less to corridor. They still have impacts in terms of how much money the college can obtain in terms of funding. So that's another layer of complexity. But at this point in time, we're at our midpoint, no risk of losing funding from the corridor.
Thanks, Mark. Right between the blue lines. Okay, let's go to this question on the board from Lisa Lalonde. As the volume of international students increases, it reminds me that we must provide intentional care and responsiveness in our classrooms, and this takes time. This is also very applicable to our domestic students as well. Formulas that represented the needs of students prior to the pandemic are not fully meeting the needs for all of our students today. I'd love to hear how the people, faculty, counseling are going to be supported further to support our students as we grow. Thanks. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to start with an answer that perhaps you weren't expecting. And rather than talking about LTS and all of that I'll get around to, I want to talk a little bit about a couple of the initiatives that we have in our strategic enrollment plan, and really looking at retention. The reality is that the pandemic has had an impact on the academic preparedness of our students. It's declined. And I think anybody that spent any time in front of our students will agree. There's also, however, been a decline in our students' social preparedness and their ability to interact with each other, to interact with their peers, to work in groups together. They spent 2 years in front of a Zoom screen like the rest of us did, and haven't been used to these social environments like a classroom. So noting that, as we put the strategic enrollment plan together this year, there's 2 initiatives in particular that I want to mention that are really more aimed at data-driven actions that we can take with our existing student body to help them be more successful. And so one of the initiatives is looking at the number of college-initiated withdrawals. There's a mouthful. Let me unwrap that for you. What that means is by the time a student has gotten to the end of a semester, very often level 1 of a program, but not always, they have not met the progression requirements to go on to level 2. They have not been successful enough in their classes for us to believe they have a reasonable chance of success in the next level. And so the college says, thank you very much, but you're no longer allowed to continue in that program. This is not desirable from the student's perspective, and it's certainly not desirable from the college's perspective. And so we have an initiative where we are actively looking at a number of programs that have high rates of college-initiated withdrawal, and we are trying to unpack the reasons and help the faculty work with those students in different ways. That might mean working with faculty on some development activities for them. It might also mean that we need to rethink curriculum and think about how our students, that level, if that's a particularly difficult level, perhaps we need to think about reworking that so that there's going to be a higher chance of success for students to move through the entire program. And what worked 3 years ago might not be working now. And once we have accepted a student at Algonquin College, that's our way of saying, we think you have what it takes to succeed. And so it's up to us, it's incumbent on us to figure out how to help that student succeed. So it's curriculum, it's support for faculty, it's student supports, but all of that will be tied into that initiative to begin to mitigate and decrease the number of college-initiated withdrawals. In a parallel but different initiative, we're also looking at particular courses that have high failure rates. If you've got a course where 60%, and I'm making numbers up, I don't know of any particular example, but if you've got a course where 60% of the students fail, you have a problem with curriculum. And so let's think about how that can be done so that we can redesign curriculum and again, help faculty, many of the same themes, help the students, but ensure that the pieces are in place and that we're addressing this to again mitigate the failure rate for those students. And I'm saying failure as in they get an F in the class and they're not allowed to move on. So we're looking at those sorts of things, and we recognize that it's not just students coming in, but it's once they're here, how are we helping them succeed? That said, we are also, going back to my LTS examples, our Learning and Teaching Services unit is phenomenal. And if you don't utilize their services as a faculty member on a regular basis, think about doing so. They live to help you help your students. It's what floats their boat. And there's so many different activities available to you, both formal and informal. And if you've got a question and they don't have a support designed to help you with that, they'll design a support to help you with that. It's what they do, it's what they're there for. And part of that is the training around how to help a diverse group of students, and I'm using diverse to be all inclusive, meaning they're not all the same. How do we ensure that all of those students have a sense of belonging and that they are taught in a way that works for them to help them succeed? There's a lot of that training that's already available, and we need to make sure that we are increasing access to that support and that professional development. I could go on for a while, but you get an idea that there are many supports that we're doing, looking through. And as the question stated, it's not there anymore. As the question just stated, it's not just international students. I'd say that much of what I said is also true for Indigenous students. It's true for all of our students, and it's part of our commitment to being learner-driven and ensuring that our students have, and we are prepared to give what's necessary for them to be successful at the college. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands up here or online or on our message board. So I guess this brings us to the end of our Q&A period. If we were not able to answer a question that you had in mind, but you just didn't get it in, go ahead and ask your one up, and they can help you, or they can reach out to somebody that can help you. Bottom line is, just ask, and don't keep that bottled up. So thank you, everybody, for the discussion. Thank you to the executive team and all our folks that joined us as subject matter experts. And thank you to everybody for joining today. The intention of these town halls is to stay connected and informed. So it was great to hear the questions and answers today, and a reminder to please fill in the survey so that we can continue to improve town halls moving forward. Finally, wear your green or Algonquin College gear loud and proud. We are Algonquin College. We are all Algonquin College, and we are all changing lives on a daily basis. Thank you for having me. I will now invite Claude back to the podium for some final remarks.
I was going to ask for a round of applause for for our wonderful moderator for today. Great job, Alana. Thank you very much. Sense of humor, poised, wonderful. Thank you. We'll reinvite you. No, we'll spread the wealth. Well done. And I'm so glad I wore green. Can't you tell? No. There you go. It's the socks. I love these socks. So they're always, there's always some green somewhere. So wear it proudly. Whatever green you wear it proudly. A big thank you to our live and online audience. You've been great. Your questions were thoughtful, very diverse. We covered a wide range of topics, and thank you for bringing those. It's clear what's on your mind, and you weren't shy about bringing them forward, and we're able to hopefully answer them. One of the comments you said at our last feedback session from the town hall was, we're going in circle. We're not answering the questions straight on. So hopefully we were more direct with our answers to your questions. And again, if you feel we weren't, please give us that feedback. We need to hear from you, the good, the bad, and everything in between. That's how we improve, and we bring to you what makes sense and is of value to you. So appreciate our time this afternoon. Love the time we had prior to the town hall with music from TJ Morrison, the coffee and treats that were there in the back for folks to enjoy. Want to say thank you to our panelists again on behalf of Algonquin College, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you very much.